Welcome to the limitations of cost-benefit analysis in public transportation. Cost-benefit analysis, or CBA, is the most widely used evaluation framework. It is used because it is a comprehensive evaluation tool. It may lead to efficient allocation of resources, and it accounts for both costs and benefits. It is one of the few tools available that allows various projects to be evaluated against each other, ensuring that projects are comparing apples with apples and oranges with oranges, thus allowing prioritization of resources and funding. However, currently and in practice, the most compelling reasons for its use is that many governments and agencies require CBA for final approval of projects. Ausroads, Infrastructure Australia, and every state road and transit agency specifies in their literature that a positive CBR must be produced in order to secure funding. Yet despite this widespread adoption, there are limitations, and these need to be acknowledged when reviewing CBR or CBA figures in context. First off, traffic forecasting. As illustrated by Eastlink, and more recently the widely discredited figures from the East-West link, traffic volumes are routinely overestimated by 20 to 60%. Yet the Ausroads guide only requires a plus or minus of 20% to be considered as the extremes of the sensitivity analysis, which overstates the benefits of the project. As a result, whenever I read forecasted traffic volumes, I wind them back by 20 and 60% respectively to give the proper range for upper and lower limits. Discount rate. The discount rate, as it increases, favours projects that can be scaled up over time. For example, adding additional lanes to a freeway at a later date, or those that can be built in sections, leading to salami tactics. This can be seen in Melbourne's southeast, which started out as the Dandenong Bypass, was connected to the Westall Road extension, and nicely dovetailed into the Dingley Bypass, and will ultimately be upgraded from an arterial road with traffic lights at 80 km per hour to the F2 with flyovers at 100 km an hour, as illustrated in the 1969 Melbourne Transport Plan. In contrast, heavy rail projects are front-end capex heavy, as they are scaled with service frequency. For example, if the Rowville line were to be constructed, you can't run a section from Rowville to Waverley Park and then wait for sufficient service numbers to build up and construct the next section. This makes significant heavy rail projects difficult to get off the ground, as the upfront cost is high, and therefore risky in the eyes of bureaucrats and politicians alike. This has resulted in no new significant railways being built in Melbourne since the Second World War, not counting the City Loop and now the Melbourne Metro. Cost estimation. Australia is notoriously an expensive place to build modern infrastructure, and cost overruns generally fall into three categories: overly optimistic ex-ante cost estimates, based on forecasts, not reality, poor project management, and poor contracting practices. Having said that, it is only a fifth of all road and rail projects that make up the 90% of cost overruns by value, i.e., when things go bad, they go really bad through knock-on effects. For example, the Parramatta Light Rail blew out by $500 million due to mispricing and omissions from the business case. WestConnex, on the other hand, has crept up from $10 billion to $16.8 billion due to changes in scope, which comes back to poor project management. If the scope is incomplete, don't go to tender. The later something needs to be changed, the more expensive it gets, as per common contracting paradigms. The problem with this becoming the norm means public bureaucrats build more and more fat into their cost estimates to cover themselves, while hurting the cost-benefit ratio, ensuring fewer projects see the light of day. Value of life. The value of amenity of those impacted by the project varies wildly. One of the functions of CBA seeks to do is monetize every factor so that they can be compared on a level playing field. Some of these factors are easy to monetize, for example, the fares collected from public transport service. The impact of negative or positive health impacts varies and is not only difficult to estimate due to the diffuse sources, then to take to the next step of monetization, as can be seen represented by the extremes in the health values from various road projects. Safety. Not so much a significant issue in Australia due to our robust OH&S laws and safety culture, However, in non-OECD countries, fatalities during construction and operation are an issue. In China, for example, after the Wenzhou fatal incident killing 40, 168 flaws in China's high-speed rail network have since been identified. Value of time. While travel time is easy to estimate on a new road or rail project, the changes to current traffic flow and mode of public transport are difficult to model and very complex. Adding to these complexities, indirect methods of valuing travel time have been used, which further adds to the inaccuracy of the benefit. As a general rule, freight and business trips are valued highly, and personal trips are valued at 25 to 70% of the user's current wage. This is one of the factors that saw huge variation in the CBR for the East-West link, from a negative 0.5 to a positive 1.4, due to the amount of estimated freight and business trips. The same can be seen happening again with the Western Distributor, now the Westgate Tunnel. Two items of note here. Primarily, you need to have a higher level of income to afford and run a car. Therefore, the trips made via roads, highways and freeways are valued more than those made via public transport, where the only barrier to entry is the cost of the fare. Therefore, the trip made by road contributes more benefits to those made via public transport. Secondarily, there are some cases where an increase in travel time is viewed as a positive in leisure and tourist areas like the Great Ocean Road. Regional impacts. Does not account for network or crowding out effects. As we can see in the Melbourne Metropolitan Rail Network, there are several single track sections that limit service provision. However, timetables are not factored into the CBR. As a result, a single track section is treated the same as a dual track section. This factor is the main one contributing to the Rowville line not being constructed, as there's no spare capacity on the Dandenong corridor to run trains to the city, further compounded by CD9. Also, why freight is having a harder and harder time shipping by rail, as paths available are declining in availability and at less desirable times. Also, the detrimental effects from rat running to avoid tolls on tollways and alternate paths for placarded loads on trucks are not factored into road projects. Local impacts. Does not account for the agglomeration and land use interaction. Cost-benefit analysis assumes that whatever the current land uses around a proposed project will continue, despite making the local area either more or less desirable, or improving or disadvantaging the mobility of different modes of transport. New railway stations typically increase land values. This benefit is not included, while decreasing property values are not included in road or freeway cost-benefit analysis either. Equity. Not included in cost-benefit analysis. Monetization is not universally accepted. Not all factors can be monetized, or to a point that it's acceptable, which in turn means they're not included. Many institutions do not accept a monetized figure of a factor, favoring other measures, such as decreasing travel time, increasing amenity, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, and so on. Ion Rapid Transit in the region of Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, uses measures of land rezoned from farmland to other purposes as its metric of success. Environmental impacts. Environmental factors are difficult to monetize, with large uncertainty ranges, everything from the electricity used, if it came from fossil fuels or renewable sources, to the fuel used by various vehicles and what portion are in tune. Does the project pass through a greenfields region? How much wildlife is displaced? What portions are endangered? This also ties back to the value of life factors discussed earlier, with the value of the pollutants and impacts on health difficult to estimate. It should also be noted that life cycle analysis is not performed with cost-benefit analysis, so the advantages of a lower capex are included, but the possible higher operations and maintenance costs are not, thus biasing low front-end capex projects. Residual value. Often overlooked, no agreement on methodology. One of the biggest issues is that of the life and residual value of the infrastructure being proposed. When the government bodies propose various transport plans, they are usually for a set time period. Infrastructure Victoria has set a 30-year limit on their plan. Therefore, projects that are cheaper and only meet the minimum 30-year life of the infrastructure have an inherent bias over those that are more expensive and would last longer. Typically, rail infrastructure has a longer lifespan over road infrastructure before the need for complete renewal. Conclusion. While cost-benefit analysis is an important tool to not only determining if a project is worth pursuing, estimate the benefits to the community, and compare that project against others on a level playing field, it is important to acknowledge its limits. It's only as good as the accuracy of the figures put into it, and these need examination. I sincerely hope you've learnt something from this video, and do not forget to like and subscribe for future transport topics.